Okay, hello everyone. I hope you're enjoying the conference so far. If you are not, you can blame me. Yes, so my name is Matti, Lyra, and the talk was originally titled Evaluating Unsupervised Models, but as I was making the slides, I sort of figured that I'll only have time to talk about topic models, so now you'll only hear about topic models. There's my Twitter account. If you want to tweet at me, there is a companion notebook that goes with the talk, and it has quite a lot more detail on the things I'm going to say. You can find it from my GitHub page. I'll try to get it posted on the berlin.pydata.org blog as well. So this talk is really an overview of what's available for evaluating topic models. There's quite a lot of links to relevant literature, as well as software, which is why the companion notebook exists. You don't have to try to write everything down now. You can just go to the notebook and you'll find all the references there. I'm going to cover quite a lot of material, and the aim here really is to give you an intuition for why the metrics exist and what is it that they're trying to measure. So I'm not going to go into detail in actually almost anything, but just try to give you some kind of an understanding of why we have these metrics and what are they trying to do. And I'll focus on tools that are available, that are open source, and also research papers that are open access. So this is not an exhaustive list of everything, just a summary. There's 3 parts. I'll start off with just eyeballing the model, so evaluating for yourself whether you got something reasonable or not. Then some intrinsic evaluation metrics, and then some metrics that are based on human judgments, essentially trying to capture into a metric what the first part with the eyeballing does. There's an obvious omission here, which is extrinsic evaluation metrics. If you're doing, say, document classification with a topic model, well, then the document classification task itself is your evaluation metric. You don't need to know whether or not the topic model has captured some semantic information. You just optimize whatever classification metric you want to use, and as long as the topic model performs well on the task, well, that's all you care about. Right, so there's quite a lot of different kinds of topic models. I expect you to have some kind of an understanding of what topic models are, how they work. I'm not going to cover any of that in any way. The idea is that they work on a corpus of documents, so the context for doing all of the inference is a single document. However, it's somewhat poorly defined what a document means. It can be anything from a sentence, like a tweet, to a paragraph in a book, or a chapter, and so on. Once you get a model, you run new documents through that, and you get a decomposition of the kinds of the topics that are contained in that new document. And yeah, as I said, there's quite a lot of different models that you can use. This talk, the way you evaluate the model is, it doesn't matter which way you use to infer the model. The kind of information that you would wish to get out is pretty much the same regardless of the algorithm you use. So this talk is, it doesn't really matter whether you're using LDA or PLSI or spherical HDB or whatever. So this is usually what you would want to have. You have a bunch of documents, so each dot here is supposed to be a single document, and they're all sort of neatly clustered into these sort of discrete groups of documents, and you can sort of point to a cluster and go, right, that's machine learning, and that's sport, and that's this, and that's that. And you can also see that so it's captured some sort of the representation here, you know, tennis and sport are close together, so they're kind of in the same part of the semantic space, whatever that means. This is usually, however, what you get. So this is a topic model that I trained on the fake news dataset available on Kaggle. Link is in the notebook. And you can see that we've captured some structure here. So topic 9, for instance, is clearly related to the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. There's also topic 11, Flint water crisis. There's something related to Russia and weapons and NATO and so on. So there's some structure there, but evaluating whether this has actually captured all the things that you want it to is cumbersome at best. How do you know if did the model miss something that was in the corpus and you're just not seeing it? This also takes a lot of time. Okay, so I said part of that. So you want to evaluate the model to find out whether the model has really like captured the internal semantic structure that you have in the corpus. That's kind of the end goal, usually what you have here. You want to know if the topics are understandable. Maybe we can quantify that somehow. Whether they are coherent, do they like overlap with each other a lot? Are they missing topics? And so on. And then ultimately, the evaluation that you do is the utility that the topic model has for you. So if you are using the topic model, for instance, just to understand the kind of semantic structure of a corpus, well, then the ultimate evaluation metric is how much did the model further your understanding of the semantic structure of the corpus. That is, of course, difficult to put a fixed number on, but it's good to keep in mind that subjective measure is the thing that we are actually wanting to measure. Okay, so then looking at the sort of lists of top words from a model is a little bit cumbersome. So what are some tools that can help with that kind of exploration? So here's a bunch of research from the Stanford Viz group. The first paper focuses on kind of re-ranking the top words from the model. So in the previous table, you saw a sample of 6 top words from each topic. And on the left here, you see words, and here are topics just labeled with a topic number. And the terms are ranked by their sort of overall corpus frequency. And you can see that there's really no, like, you can't really pick out any immediate structure here. Then on the right, you see the methods that they develop in the paper. There's a few different metrics that they actually developed. This particular one uses kind of conditional probabilities on the sort of pairwise conditional probabilities on how likely the words are to occur kind of close together within a window. And you can see that you can hopefully see that the method that they've developed, it preserves word order. So you have things like aspect ratio and social networks and so on, maintain their order within the ranking, but you also see that the ranking kind of reveals these clusters that are semantically coherent. So this blue cluster is about sort of social networks and network analysis and so on. So that gives you a much better understanding much faster of what the model has captured. Then the second paper moves on to the document level, and they're basically doing the same thing but for documents. And now, so here you see a labeled reference corpus. So they gathered information from domain experts. They asked them to define through keywords how is their domain what kind of keywords capture their domain. And then they also asked them to give them some example documents from research papers. They're like, here's some representative research from this field and so on. So that allowed them to build this reference corpus, and then they build a topic model. And then you can see that there's some topics that map onto several kind of reference concepts. There's also some reference concepts that map onto several topics. So it's one concept is split into several topics, or one topic is trying to model 2 different reference concepts, and so on. And there's also there's missing reference concepts. There's information that exists in the corpus, but that the topic model has not captured. Okay. So that is that. Then I move on to LDA Viz, which was originally an R package, and there's now a Python port of that. This is another sort of interactive tool. Oh, so this termite stuff, this is actually available on GitHub for you to play around with. The PyLDA Viz is another interactive tool. So you get an HTML output that you can then open in your browser. And the way this works is you have your semantic topic space on the left, and your sort of word term space on the right. And this, so the proximity of these bubbles here, so each circle is a single topic, and the proximity is supposed to reflect the semantic proximity of those topics. So the first picture that you saw of the ideal case, this is trying to capture that. So this is one sort of discrete set of kind of concepts, and this is another set of different concepts. And so the way you use this is you can highlight a word, and then when you highlight a word, you can see that there's a bunch of topics where this word is very sort of prevalent, where it's used a lot, or it plays it's important in these particular topics. And you can see that when you highlight Clinton, or indeed when you highlight Trump, the same sort of area overall of the topic space gets highlighted. So this is, right, this is the same fake news data set from Kaggle. We're clearly talking about US politics. There's another way to use it. You can also flip this around and you can select or highlight just a topic. And once you do that, the list of terms changes here. So if I go back to the previous slide, you have one set of words. When you select a topic, you get a different set of terms, which is these are now specifically related to that topic, ranked in terms of how important they are for this one topic. Okay, so this gives you another way to sort of interactively poke the model and relatively quickly sort of figure out whether it's captured something interesting, what that might be, and so on. There's a few problems, however. First of all, I forgot to say, so the sizes of the circles represents the importance of that topic in the model/corpus. So how much of this topic does the corpus overall contain? You get a sort of a general understanding of, yeah, okay, some topics are more important than others. The problem is that it's really difficult to determine the relative sizes of the circles. This is a different model, but it illustrates the points. This is from the PyLDA Viz example notebook. Now, topic 1 here is clearly the most important, but can you tell what the relative importance between 10 and 15 is? The reason for why this is bad is nothing to do with PyLDA Viz as such, or LDA Viz as such. It's just really difficult to determine the relative sizes of circles. Can you tell what the area of these circles is with relation to each other? Is this 10 times the area of that, or is it 2 times or 5 times? That's the actual answer. So the blue circle is twice the area of the orange one, and the blue circle is actually 5 times the area of the green one. So you can't really, it's just difficult for humans to determine that, mainly because of this, because the area grows as the square of the radius. And it's really difficult to make those distinctions just visually. The other problem is that the semantic the proximity in this topic space is also, it does capture something, but it's also somewhat arbitrary. Yes? Okay, so your question is on the graph, what are the axes? I'll explain this just now. So this is supposed to capture the semantic similarity of topics. So some topics go here and some topics go there. Now, the problem is that there's various different ways to do, because this is obviously two-dimensional. Well, the topics aren't two-dimensional. So this is projected from the projected down from the sort of intertopic similarity matrix down into 2 dimensions. Now there's 3 different algorithms for doing that projection. On the left, you see principal coordinates analysis, and on here you see metric multidimensional scaling. Now again, the question is, are topics 10 and 15 close together or far apart? Are they semantically similar or semantically not similar? Now the other problem relating to your question is that, so these 2 axes are the principal components, but that's also somewhat meaningless in this context. these might as well not be there. It doesn't, the axes don't give you any information. You also lose all sense of scale because the size of the circles and the location of the circles are not related to each other in any way. So while the tool, did I answer your question? These axes should not be here. They're completely meaningless. It's a projection from a high-dimensional space onto 2 dimensions. It depends on how many topics you have. So it's a pairwise topic-to-topic similarity metric, a similarity matrix projected down onto 2 dimensions. But what those 2 dimensions are, you don't know. Sorry? You would hope so, but it depends on the algorithm that you use. It depends on whether you're using this or that. It depends on what the algorithm actually gives you as an output. So you need to understand, like in order to really understand what these axes mean, you need to look into the details of how the projection algorithm works and what the output of that is. Okay, so then let's move on to intrinsic evaluation, which will hopefully give us a better understanding of what the model has done. If you look online, you will often be pointed to using perplexity. Don't use perplexity. The problem is that perplexity doesn't, like, it comes from the sort of, from the language modeling community, and it doesn't capture the kind of semantic information that we want. If you look at what, like, ignore everything left from here. That's just the log likelihood of some held out data. So D prime here is data that your model hasn't seen before. Now, if you have a model that always predicts cat, and you have a held out corpus that only contains the word cat, well, then your log likelihood is going to be good. But that's not a particularly good topic model. So this measure doesn't tell you anything of how well the semantics of the corpus have been captured. So how would that, what would a measure look like that would capture that? Now, ignore that we have a model. There is no model. Let's just for a while think about what kind of, how would we describe concepts and how could we capture the semantic coherence of those concepts if we wanted to. So here's 2 documents that talk about ice hockey. The first one talks about, the first one is about Teemu Selänne, and the second one is about Pekka Rinne, both Finnish ice hockey players. Now, if I now assert to you that these are the words that sort of capture the semantics of the concept of ice hockey. This is what it means for something to be related to ice hockey, sort of roughly speaking. So we have words that are clearly related to ice hockey, like names of ice hockey leagues and ice hockey teams, names of ice hockey players, but then there's also sort of general stuff like shots, which is definitely related to ice hockey, but if you just see shots sort of out of context without these documents, you might associate that rather with, I don't know, shooting. So let's take this further. And I'll just remove the words that are the unrelated words, and now we have 2 sets of words, and now we can say that, okay, well, this is now what we say is the meaning of ice hockey. You can see where this is going, right? This is the output that you get from a topic model. So, okay, so what would then capture if we were given this description of the category of ice hockey? Well, how would we capture the semantic coherence of this description of the category from some data? Well, we can use a measure that does that. And there's quite a bit of research that has been done on this. This is one of the measures. And what you see here is this is essentially the conditional likelihood of the words occurring with each other. But notice that the conditional likelihood is capturing information about 2 terms. So there's some context there. It isn't context-free like the perplexity measure was before. So now we can take those words that we defined, and then we can go and look at some reference corpus and measure probabilities, and then use this measure, and there you go. Sorry? This is iterating over words. Or word, well, sorry, I'll get to that in just a moment. So this research has sort of encapsulated the various different ways of measuring that confirmation, that metric that, the metric that I just showed. So this is the last paper, the Röde et al. This is actually implemented partially in GenSim. Not all of the metrics are available there, but most of them are. So what this is doing is, so first you do segmentation, which is the sort of putting the words together that I just showed. Then you have some way of calculating the probabilities. Get to that later. Then you compute this confirmation measure, which is the thing that I just showed you. And then you do aggregation, which basically just means that you take the mean. They do a number of different aggregation measures, but essentially you just take the mean. So let's see what this looks like in practice. I'm going to take this this topic 9 here. This is the same model that you saw before. And then you do segmentation. This is what you compute the measure over. Tal? Yeah. OK. So you do segmentation. There's loads of different ways of doing segmentation. So you take the top words from the model, and then you do pairs of words. Or you do pairs of pairs, or you do pairs of triples, and so on and so on. You decide how you do that. You compute your confirmation measure, which uses, in this case, probabilities. Not all of them use probabilities. Others are sort of vector similarity things. So you compute these probabilities. You need to have a way of computing the probabilities. So maybe you just use the document level probability of the words occurring. This is from a reference corpus that the model hasn't seen, ideally. And then you get a number. This first one, so you get a model. This is 35 topics. You do some segmentation, you do some way of calculating probability, then you compute some confirmation measure for the similarity of stuff. And then you do aggregation, which this you should just replace internally as the mean. And then you get a number out, which this measure is the one that they develop in the paper, and it's a combination of vector similarity of the words and the NPMI. So I'm not exactly sure what the scale of this function is, but I think it's between -1 and 1. Or you can take the same thing, but compute a different confirmation measure, and then you get a different number out, which is in a different scale. So that's not exactly helpful. Then you can do that. You can feed in a model that has more topics than this model, and you get a number that is, again, different from the second one. But now look at the scale here. How, is this model 3 times as bad as that model? Well, I don't know, because the scale is just undefined. OK, and you can, you understand the problem here. So this is, I think it's a step in the right direction, but there's a few issues here. So first of all, these pairs of words that you're computing from your top words in the model, you're taking the mean over those. There's going to be a lot of pairs, so you're computing the mean over a lot of things. You have no understanding of what the variance is. This isn't included in the pipeline. So you have no way of knowing whether this value that you get out, is that actually representative of the overall sort of similarities that you've just inferred. The different values are not really comparable. I'm pretty sure you could do some normalization, but that would be extra research. You need to be really, really careful what your reference corpus is. So you're measuring the probabilities that are fed into this confirmation measure from a reference corpus. Now, if you're just doing Wikipedia, you're probably fine. You have enough data on Wikipedia to do an 80-20 split and use the 20 as your reference corpus, for instance. But if you're doing some domain-specific thing, like, I don't know, topic modeling on legal documents, well, there tend not to be that many legal documents openly available, and the data sets that you might have may not be big enough for you to split them. The problem is that legal text doesn't look anything like the text that you get from Wikipedia. So if you if you use as reference corpus Wikipedia, you're going to get really weird sort of probabilities or similarities out of the reference corpus, not because your model is wrong, but just because the two corpora that you're using don't actually match in terms of the word or in terms of the statistics that you see there. And then the other problem is that it could be the case, theoretically, that this 100 topic model, which is clearly worse than the 35 topic model, actually has, so this 100 topic model has all the 35 topics that this model has captured. It then has captured, say, an extra 10 topics that this thing didn't capture, but then all the rest are junk, right? So you have 45 topics that are good, and then you have 55 topics that are junk. Well, those junk topics can cause this to be worse. But does it really mean, like, if you look at the model, you can tell what the junk topics are. You can just see them right away and go, okay, those are irrelevant, I can just ignore them. But the 45 that you got are actually better than the 35 that you got here, but that's not reflected in this measure. So, finally, human judgment-based methods. Again, research, this is sort of coming off the fact that at some point people notice that, oh yeah, perplexity is a bad thing to do, so let's try to figure out what's nicer. So in the Reading Tea Leaves paper, they developed two different tasks to measure how well the predictions of the model correspond to our intuitions of what topics are or should be. So they do word intrusion. So you have a set of words. Again, these are taken from the top words from the model, from a topic. And then you insert a word that has low probability for a topic and high probability for some other topic. So it's intruding in the semantics of this one topic. And here, most people will say that it's pig. So the predictions of the humans on what the intruding word is converge to a single entry. Whereas if you have a topic that is semantically incoherent, they'll just be all over the place, and you can tell from just from the spread of the predictions that you get from the humans that this particular model is not sort of semantically consistent with itself. Then there's another task, which is topic intrusion. So this is so you get the title from a document and the snippet. And then when you run this document through the topic model, you get a probability distribution over the topic. So you take a few of these top ones, and then you take one or two, maybe just one of the really bottom ones, the really like this document is really not about these topics. And then you get something like this. So you have the two top ones are sort of supposed to be the like belong to the document, like the document is of these topics. And then the bottom one is sort of, this is one of the low ranked ones. And again, the same task, the setup is exactly the same as for word intrusion. The problem here is that it's relatively difficult to determine. You usually very rarely get really sort of clean-cut topics. So it's very difficult often to determine what the intruding topic is. Okay, so in summary, topic models are difficult to evaluate. You can do qualitative evaluation, but it's labor-intensive and often very, very subjective. Quantitative analysis relies on all kinds of issues that you have to deal with, basically when you're dealing with humans. Open source software is available. There's also lots of research that's available as open access. But the real take-home point here is that you cannot define a universally good model. It does not exist. Because it depends on what you want the model to do. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. Now, the final point, if I may just run over time a little bit, is the question of, so the reason why these things are difficult to evaluate is because we don't have a proper definition for what, I don't know, what coherence means, or what do we mean when we say a concept, right? It's essentially, the question is, what are words? So I have a short video here. Is the sound on? There is no sound. Okay, forget it. So it's a news clip. It's funny. Basically, this guy is talking about Trump, and he's asking the question, what does he mean when he says words? Does he mean the words, or does he mean something like the words? And this is indeed a good question, because how somehow reasonable is it to expect sets of words to consistently capture concepts that we have in our heads of what exists in the world? Like, how many words would you need to, I don't know, capture ice hockey? And would the person next to you pick those same words? Would they understand the same category? So cat, dog, pet, rabbit, horse are pets, animals. But if I change a few of the words, then does this topic, is this cats? Or is it inconsistent? Snowball could refer to the cat in Simpsons, but then dog is a kind of an outlier. So maybe that's an intruding word. I don't know. And then also cat and dog are not, like, often when this problem isn't limited to just topic models. This is all unsupervised sort of NLP, including word vectors. Often cat and dog will get a similar vector, because they're sort of similar things, right? But they can also be the opposites of each other. So if you're talking about cat people and dog people, then they are semantically precisely the polar opposites of each other. But there's currently we don't really know how to capture that at the moment. Thank you very much.
We have plenty of time for questions. Lunch is being not quite served like yet, so I was told to score. So I'm going to type.
I'm going to answer your questions really slowly.
Yes, please. Questions, please.
We also have 1.5 hours for lunch, so it's not. Lev? I can repeat the question, it's fine.
Okay. Can we come back to the slide which has PCA and MDS?
Maybe.
Together?
Eyeballing. Here we go. You mean this one?
Yeah, this slide is very confusing to me. Because
It's very confusing for most people, I've learned.
like principal components analysis. Oh, you have principal coordinates analysis.
It's principal coordinate analysis.
It's not principal components analysis, I see. But, okay, what's the difference between principal coordinates analysis and metric multidimensional scaling?
You're going to have to read the papers yourself.
Okay. Man. But
there's also, so the third algorithm for this is t-SNE.
Uh-huh.
But again, they just all work, they do dimensionality reduction, but how exactly they do that, take a weekend off and go read the papers.
But like, if you look at PyLDavis, for example, there they use PCA, which is principal.
By default, they use by default they use principal coordinate analysis, PCOA.
Okay, that might explain things better. Cool, but just okay. Then I'll have a side note about coherence. So you mentioned that coherence is not useful, sort of, in a way.
Yeah, okay, no, that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm saying that it's not without its faults. You shouldn't, if you like run the coherence pipeline in GenSim and you get a big number out, it'll give you an understanding, but
there's a more mundane, everyday problem which coherence solves in GenSim. The reason coherence was added to GenSim is because when you train an LDA model, like on Wikipedia over like 2 days, and you see it running.
No. This is because I presented some criticism of GenSim.
No, just the reason it's been added is there's a more mundane technical problem. When you train an LDA model for a while, like your perplexity, okay, that's fine.
Okay, no, but I agree with the point that you're trying to make. that it is useful. My motivation for this talk is to say that evaluating these things is really difficult. The fact that you get a number out, it doesn't mean that you have a good model necessarily. It doesn't mean that you have the model that you want it to have.
Okay. I see.
Mira? PCOA.
So PCOA versus MDS. One thing you kind of hinted at, but you didn't make very explicit, is that these are actually very complicated beasts in their own right. And you're taking LDA or HTTP, whatever, completely unsupervised, lots of moving parts. Some have more free parameters than others, but you get something very different each time. And then you can't see what it's doing, obviously, because it's 100-dimensional if you have 100 topics. So you go, oh, I know, I'm just going to reduce that down to 2 dimensions. But the way you do that is completely messed up. All these things are throwing away a different amount of information, and they're making different sacrifices. And even worse, they have a lot of non-determinism. They have a lot of free parameters. Like t-SNE, I don't know if you've seen it, there was a really good blog post recently about t-SNE. That has like 20 things you can turn, and depending on...
I think I put the blog post in the notebook.
That's a very good one. So depending on how exactly you set those knobs, you end up with completely different results.
Yeah.
So bear in mind that this is a very harsh reduction of information down to 2D just because we can't think of it in any more than 2D.
Yes, that is a very valid point. Thank you. But it doesn't, so that doesn't really, like, as such, reduce the functionality or the utility of this. This is, you do, as you see here, like you do actually get these groupings of document or topics that are semantically related. It's just that determining exactly how related is, again, a little difficult. This is the exact same model with the dimensionality reduction in 2 different ways. So are 10 and 15 close semantically, or, I mean, in one picture, yes, in the other, they're on the opposite side of the coordinate system. What are you supposed to make of that information? Other questions? Yes.
In practice, should I just choose the model where they look closer?
Yeah, in practice, do all of the above.
Okay.
Well, again, but it depends on what you want. Like, yeah, use the visualization tools to gain a kind of an understanding whether roughly the sort of thing that you were expecting to find in the model is there. Look at the metrics. Look at perplexity if you want. Look at the metrics and then sort of compare the results and the outputs of those, but don't just like look at one thing and go, okay, that's fine, we're done.
Do you think that is say the long way, right? So kind of a good practice I've learned I don't always do is kind of to define what is a good result before I actually start evaluating, right? And
So that's one way of doing. That's often difficult because often the reason why you pick up topic modeling is because you don't know what's in the corpus, and you're hoping that the topic model will tell you. So again, depending a little bit on your use case, maybe you can define what a good output would be. But if you're just trying to understand the semantic composition of the corpus, then I don't really know how you would even define that.
Question?
There was.
Yeah, when you spoke about the coherent evaluation measure, when it actually has a high measure, does it mean that most of the words in a single topic are actually found closer in the reference text or something?
Yeah, yeah. So the way but again, this. Hold on, where? So you're talking about this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So overall, all of the confirmation measures, these things that give you the actual metric, work in precisely that way. So lower number is worse and higher number is better.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
But it's, again, you can't really, like, telling the difference between the scales of the different measures is... There was a question in front here. And then Barkov, yes.
Thanks for the talk. I was wondering, first a practical amateur question. If you've got your model with a lot of topics, a lot of dimensions maybe for each topic, and you reduce it to 2 so you can plot it nicely, and as the guy over there said, you can do that any way you want, and you can probably end up getting more or less any representation you want, like we saw 2 comparisons completely differing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah.
the first amateur question, once you do that and you plot it and you say, okay, it looks good, like Clinton and Trump are next to each other, so I think that's probably a good model. Can you use the 2 dimensions that you drop down to do further modeling, or do you always go back and use the bigger set?
I don't know what the 2 dimensions mean.
Yeah, but do you know what the 100 mean that went down to 2 anyway?
Well, so the 100 is, so let's say that you have a 100 topic model. So you have a 100 by 100 topic similarity matrix. So those dimensions you do know. You know exactly the similarity of, topic 10 to topic 12 because it's in the matrix. So they're using the normalized Kullback-Leibler divergence to measure that similarity. So that gives you a precise understanding of how it's being measured and what that number represents. But that matrix is then cut down by 1 of 3 different algorithms, or I don't know, a 4th one if you can propose one, or have one, ready. What the interpretation of the remaining dimensions are depends on the algorithm.
Okay, then my follow-up question is more just like an idea then, or a comment, which is if you were to interpret the compressed version and your plot, and you say your model is good based on that visualization, which we've seen can be completely bogus, so what's to argue against just saying where you want Trump and Clinton to be, working out an algorithm that would get them there based on your stuff? So is there any point in these T-SNE things at all?
You normally don't insert the answer that you want into the method that is trying to give you the answer. You could do that, and you could
publish that, but
you could do that, and you would probably get the answer you wanted. But how do you now know if the answer is valid?
Okay.
Sorry, Barkov had a question.
One more question, and then we'll be finished.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you already answered this in the first half of your talk because I wasn't there for it.
Yes.
But I want to know if you think, are there different kinds of metrics depending on what you're using the LDA model for? For example, if you happen to be using it for clustering or something, is there a better metric? Do you think any of these metrics could work?
What do you want to cluster?
Fair enough, but I'm just saying, if depending on what you want to do with your topic models, do you have different?
So the obvious answer to that is yes. If you're using an external task, that's your metric. If you're doing clustering, well then you can do. So one thing that I didn't actually mention at all is in relation to clustering. So you can also measure this. Hold on. Right? This is the ideal output from an LDA, from a topic model. So you could. There's a bunch of network analysis methods and clustering metrics that are completely unrelated to topic modeling. They're just generic clustering metrics that allows you to measure how separated these clusters are between themselves. So you could use something like that if what you want to get out of the model is clusters that are separated. That's not always the case.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank